always great when you get asked to sort of speak about why you got into science in the first place. It makes you actually kind of go back X number of years and start thinking, God, what was it? And I'm afraid it's kind of a bit cliched, I guess. I had a really inspiring biology teacher and a really supportive family who, and I remember him, Mr. Hanks. He was great, kind of larger than life, sort of stood up at the front of the class and had so much enthusiasm for everything he was talking about, which was actually in marked contrast to the two other sciences. So I think that's probably why I started going down that route. My parents always said to me, whatever you want to do, we'll support you as long as you're happy. Great parents. But actually, something that I have been thinking about is the advice I was getting when I was at school was to do medicine. I was in the kind of school, if you were good at science, you were kind of put down a medical track. If you were good at humanities, you were told you should do law, sort of a high-achieving all-girls school. Actually, the all-girls thing is maybe something we'll come back to a bit later as well. And it was only a bit later, I missed my offer actually. I had an offer to go to a couple of places to do medicine, and a bit of a disaster with one of my own. And I decided to do pharmacology. So as I was doing it, it was always with I want to do medicine. I know I want to do medicine. That's the goal I set for myself when I was younger. And then all of a sudden I was in this lecture theatre once, and I was like, why am I bored? This is the closest I'm going to get to a medical lecture. And the lecturer at the end said, well, you might be wondering what all this is about. I didn't tell you how these drugs worked. And I was like, that's it. I've got it. That's the thing that really drove me. I realised I really loved that process of thinking, of finding out and getting deep into a subject. And from then, I kind of I had experience in industry. I worked in a biotech company in the States for a little while, and I found out I was practically skilled as well, which is something I never really got at school, and I think that's another interesting angle. So kind of following through, I decided I didn't want to work in industry. I did a PhD. I've got a background in postdoctoral neuroscience, and I kind of think that there are so many things in my background that helped me get to where I am, and I think looking at that, the reason that we started Science Girl in the way that we did, which I should get getting into Science Girl. I don't know how many people in the room have heard of Science Girl. Maybe not very many. But a couple of years ago, we launched as a sort of foot stomp on the internet to the European Commission Science It's a Girl Thing campaign, which was all about getting more girls in science with hair flicks and makeup exploding, and it could have been for anything. And we sort of said to ourselves, these women aren't scientists and they're not doing any science. And worse, the only person doing any science in this entire video is a man looking up from his microscope. So we said, enough's enough. We need to get some real women out there. We need to show the diversity of jobs and careers, because that's something that I wasn't really familiar with when I was younger. And to get some really great and inspiring and a range of role models out there. We put out a calendar, and then people kept on coming up to us saying, how do I become a science girl? We're like, I haven't thought about that. Why do you want us to exist? And actually the role models thing really came through strongly, having people you can look up to as real people, not as kind of little snippets on a website, take this subject, do this job, but real rounded people with kind of passions and loves and kind of faults and failings as well, and people you can identify with. And I think there really is a lack of female role models out there, but it's really important that role models don't have to be female, they can be anybody that you identify with. And I think one of the things that we're really passionate about as an organisation is showing that science is for everyone, but also this gender divide, it's false, and it's about talking about people as individuals and allowing and empowering everybody to reach their potential.
Thank you.
Well, that's quite hard to follow. So, in the few minutes I had to think about why I became a scientist, actually what springs out most in my journey through science was teachers at my secondary school where I did my GCSEs. I had a biology teacher who said to me and to my parents at parents' evening, this girl won't go very far. She's got nose and she sets off alarms. And I think at that point I thought, right, okay, I'm not going to go far. I'm not very good at. So she'll scrape a C in her biology GCSE if she's lucky. She works really, really hard. And I think that, because of the sort of quiet, unstated person I am, I thought, no, I'm going to prove you wrong, no. And I come from a family of academics, but they're very mathsy. And maths has been a complete mystery to me. And I'm quite ashamed of that, really, because now I'm very much about promoting maths in the STEM stuff we do. So I'm ashamed that my maths is so poor. But what I then went on to do was to do my A-levels in science and biology. And it was always running through me that I will show this woman. I don't care what you say, I will show you that I can do it. Because she was like you think of a really bad teacher, somebody who's uninspiring, she'd stand at the front, it was so dry, and I thought, I'm going to prove you wrong. And then I went on to do a degree in biology, and a PhD in biology here. And I must say to her, look, don't ever judge a book by its cover. And I think that's what drives me through and through. It's because she said, you'll never do it. And that for me I think it just set me up in the career, because after I finished my PhD, I was studying here at Imperial. Well, not here in South Kensington as I thought I was. We were at a little known asylum called Silwood Park, which I don't know if anyone's come across that. It's it's where they put all the life science people out there, because we were kind of a unique bunch, and we had fields and sheep and stuff to play with. But then, while I was writing up my PhD, I got a job working in what was then the school's liaison office here, and it was setting up a mentoring scheme. And the mentoring scheme was putting our undergraduates into local underperforming state schools, and on a Wednesday afternoon just encouraging the kids to understand the subjects a bit better using these students. What a great idea. Role models. That's what it comes back to, role models. And I so enjoyed doing this, and I by that stage lost all thought of going on to postdocs and all that. And I could hear my father, who's a professor, just crying inwardly. But then I think, because always at the back of my mind there was that teacher who said, you can't do this, and I thought, no, sorry. And I think that's underpinned everything I've ever done. And I've worked through the school's liaison, then turned into outreach, and the team has built and built and built, and now it's a huge honour to be the head of the outreach team now, working with people that I've worked with for years and years and years. One of them's at the back there, Mel, give a wave. Mel, she's a chemist. I'm still waving flag for biology. My team, we are very chemist heavy, but I am dressing now. We're getting some more physicists in. And what underpins the work that we do is this need for role models. You know, when we put our undergraduates and our postgraduates as well, the early career researchers, out in schools, or they come into our Reach Out lab, and they're there, they're engaged, they're loving their science, and that really rubs off on the kids that come in. It doesn't matter what age the kids are, from really tiny ones to disillusioned A-level students who are really struggling with physics. We get the students in and we work with them, and it's that whole role model ethos. You know, I know you find this hard, but I can do it, let's do this together. It's that can-do attitude, and that underpins everything we do. I'm going to stand off my soapbox now and let Amy say something.
Thank you.
There's something actually left to say. Quite a great sort of background on story as well. I'm not trying to think of something original now. I want an next one, so no. Right, well, my son is actually quite similar to both the Annas. I never had a real sort of blue sky moment where I realised I wanted to be in science. I've always been interested in science, and I was one of these really annoying students that would be going up to the teacher going, why? Why is this happening? Why? Can you tell me? And so go, yeah, but it's because of this, this and this. But why? And it's carried on asking why. And I was also one of your disabled students, so I spent a lot of time in and out of school and not having a very good education. And because of that, I kind of sort of fell out the cycle, and the teacher started losing faith in me. So when I was doing my GCSEs, my A-levels, my teachers told me I wouldn't succeed, I wouldn't be able to do anything in my life, I'd end up being on the dole and things like that. And it's quite a hard thing to hear. And I was also told, again, we got similar to the Annas, that science wasn't for girls, basically. You either could be a doctor if you were really smart, or if you were not that good but you still enjoyed science, go down the nurse route. And I wasn't happy with that. It never really clicked with me. But I sort of kept at it, sort of kept going, and I thought I wanted to go down a medical route as well. And it's during my 20s where I've been working in the NHS for a little while, and I thought to myself, you know, this is like me flogging a dead horse here. I'm not going to deny it. I'm really trying to work hard, but I'm not getting anywhere. I'm not happy where I am. And it was lucky enough that my mum suggested to me that, you know, perhaps you should go into teaching. And I sat there and thought about it and thought to myself, you know, what can I impart on them? Because I want to impart some knowledge on to my students. What can I tell them? I've not done anything great. I've not climbed Mount Everest. I've not done, you know, anything really important. I sat down and thought about it and thought to myself, well, you know, I've managed to get through school. I managed to get past bullying teachers. I managed to get past school bullies. Perhaps I actually have got something that I can tell them. So I went in, and during my first day, I thought to myself, right, okay, I'm going to get some really good training. I'm going to get some excellent knowledge from my supervisor. And I went up to her and said to her, what am I going to know? What kind of training do I need to go on? And she looked at me and went, sink or swim. In fact, teaching 5 to 6-year-olds is hard. 30 of them in a class is really hard. And trying to keep all of them engaged is tough. So I managed to start learning on the job and started teaching that way. And by the end of the first day, my teacher, my supervisor went to me, you're a natural at this. You've got a real flair for teaching science. So I've gone back sort of year after year and started teaching science to the students, teaching maths to students as well. And now I can't do the circuits, because once one teacher hears that you're quite good, they all want to have a go with you. They all want to see what you do. So I go into each of the schools and speak to all the students. And now I run my own outreach program, my own charity I call GlamSci, because when I was going through going to university to take my degree, I was actually told that I was too glamorous to be a scientist. I don't quite know what a science is going to look like. I do ask the students, well, what do you think a science actually looks like? And I get some really good answers. And most of them remind me of my old chemistry teacher, which, bless his heart, he used to put up with me and all my questions. Why? I've never lost the why. I'm still a big kid, and I think that's the most important thing, is encouraging them to think like a child, but as they grow up, bring that with them. But impart that sort of curiosity on them and inspire them. And it's got to be done at a young age as well. Because I see the students go from, say, year 1, where they're really interested, to say about year 3, year 4, year 5, where they've lost it. And there's something there that they've lost that sort of passion. So I try and go in big and bouncy, kind of get that passion going, get that enthusiasm going, and go from there with them. So yeah, that's my background.
I'm not going to tell you my life history because I'm so old that we'd be here for the rest of the day. But 2 things which actually chime what we've heard already. Fortunately, my parents only told me this a couple of years ago, but when I was at primary school, at a parents' evening, the teachers said to my parents, well, your son, you know, he's very smart, he's great, he's fantastic, he'll do really well. Unfortunately, your daughter, we can't say the same for her. Well, now, 40 years later, here I am running a Faculty of Natural Sciences. So I think we've all, you know, I'm sure you don't ever say that to your pupils or your student or your parents, parents of your students. I mean, what a dreadful thing to say about a young child. But it does, I think, make us think that actually careless comments sometimes can have a devastating effect. Actually, the women that you've seen here, well, I think they're all pretty unusual women, and clearly it had the effect of making them more determined to go on. But actually, that does raise for me one of the issues I think is very important in terms of teaching, particularly girls. Now, we heard the young Welsh lad on Anne Goldsworthy's. I mean, wasn't he a superstar? He relished the fact that he was failing or he didn't understand. That's not always the case with girls. So there is something about making sure that your girls see failure as part of the journey to success.
I think that's really interesting, actually, that whole failure conversation, because we speak so much about kind of creativity and innovation, and it's fundamental. It's what you need to fail to kind of make anything new in the first place, and it's the fact that we label it as this really terrible thing. And I remember actually I've done in the lab, I've had some A-level students sitting next to me when I've been doing experiments, and I was recording from a brain cell, and I said to the student, so this recording that's taken me an hour to get, it will take me probably about 5 hours to analyse it. And she looked at me, she was like, it's a bit boring, isn't it? And I said, well, yeah, actually it's a bit tedious sometimes, but then I'll know what the answer is. She's like, I'm sorry, pardon? What? I was like, well, if I don't analyse this data, I don't know what happened in the experiment. And we went around this a couple of times, and she said, at school, I always know what the graph's meant to look like. So that bit is just so boring because I know where I'm going to get to. So what do I need to do the bit in the middle for? And I think that's where you lose some of that passion because it's like, well, what's the point? Whereas if you can make it about bringing themselves and their creativity and brains to the table and something that's real world and real life that they might be able to impact upon, I think that's where you kind of keep that passion.
Yeah, I say to my students, there's never any right or wrong answer. I want you to tell me your ideas and what you think is going to happen.
Yeah.
And if it's maybe not quite on the mark, I kind of try and sort of help them along and suggest other things to think about with them.
And that's part of the journey, isn't it? Because you're going through the journey with them, and some things don't work, as we know in science. With all the best planning, all the best planning in the world, something will go wrong. And I think it's that skill to be able to say, well, this didn't work, and why this didn't work is because this, that, and the other. And that's okay, because now we're going to change this slightly and go on and do that. And for us, that's really important, because it's the whole journey that they go through. And particularly what Maggie said with the girls, they're more fearful of when something fails, because they almost stand back from it, where the boys are right in there, right, let's get our hands in it, let's pull it apart, what's this bit for? And the girls literally stand back, they're afraid. And that's where I think, going back to the whole thing about the role model, you work with them and say, this is okay, and this is what we're going to do about this, and this is fine. Maybe it's something in the female psyche that we're intrinsically afraid.
Completely. Yeah, I don't know, I'm not sure. I think that I'm not sure. I think it's a slightly different conversation. I won't go down too long, but I'm not. But I think it is about putting it in a social context and I think that's what we try to do as an organisation as well, to talk about that there might not be intrinsic differences between men and women, but actually we socialise boys and girls very differently, and we kind of rough and tumble with boys, like be a good girl, all of these sorts of things that actually are tied up in kind of wider social stereotyping that do feed into what people think is appropriate and natural and sort of for girls and boys. And it's something that we're quite passionate as an organisation, sort of taking down these sort of gender stereotypes.
I'd like this now to become really an interactive discussion.
So we're just discussing
So on that particular area, do people have experience of what we're saying, that actually the girls tend to be more stand back, they don't want to show that they're involved, that they're more concerned about appearing to fail and are there ideas about how people have tackled that?
I work in quite a small little area up in Suffolk, and it's very the typical sort of social thing at the moment. There's a lot of stay-at-home mums and dads always going out for work, and you can see that in the children already, because the boys are the ones with the confidence, they go off and do stuff, but the girls are just like, oh, I just stand here and just wait for them to come back and do that. And it's really difficult, like you guys have been saying, to try and get them, well, you have a go, oh no, it's like they can do it. And it's something that I've quite struggled with as well, because I've always been kind of more like you guys, really like, well, I want to have a go and I want to do this. It's a really difficult thing to kind of to get them to do it, but I think if you can just get one child to do it, then you get like a ripple effect. I found I've managed to break through with one girl. It has like ripple
that's where
through to the
peer
others.
tutoring is actually really important as well, because a lot of the stuff is it's student to student tutoring. If you've got one particular girl who is taking the lead, get her to be the influence on the others, and so peer to peer is very important.
There's the other idea that I think the study's been done in conversation in classrooms, and that boys have a tendency to dominate, and the girls will, once they've been put back in their box and interrupted enough times, they won't interject. And sometimes doing, genderising your group, so you have a bunch of boys, you have a bunch of girls, or you have your quieter children and your more extrovert children, that can work in order to give them space to talk.
To feel the confidence,
Absolutely.
At the back there.
I teach 4 to 6-year-olds, and I don't find that's true. The boys and the girls are equally verbal or equally non-verbal. But if they are if somebody is tending to dominate when they're doing group exercises, it works very well to give out the group cards so that somebody is the go-getter and somebody is the reporter. That it forces some students to take on a role whether they like it or not. If we can catch them young, they don't have that problem.
And that's the bit what I do. I work with that sort of age group in general, and I like to put them into smaller groups and work with them in smaller groups, and give them the roles. So one person's sort of like the leader of the group, the other person is sort of the backup, and sort of give them their their roles, and then let them talk about what their roles are and what they've been doing in the experiments, that type of thing. So that's all gets everyone talking, and there isn't one person that can say, yeah, I did everything, that type of thing, for that sort of age group.
Yeah.
You were asking if other people in the room actually could see some aspects where they come from in the material there. And actually, I'm a secondary school teacher, I teach physics, and I can remember being at school myself, and I actually went to a girls' school. So really those kind of gender issues around physics didn't really exist because you were in a girls' school. However, I can remember saying to my mum that I wanted to do astrophysics, and she just laughed at me. And obviously I'd like to say that I've been more determined. In the past 2 years, I've actually sat at parents' meeting and been speaking with parents, and I've had parents say, oh, well, my daughter, she couldn't possibly do physics. I think maybe she's more suited to the other subjects. And in terms, we can do a lot of work with the pupils, but there are still those ideologies amongst the parents as well. And those.
I think parents are a real issue, and I'm really interested in the different types of sciences, so perhaps we can come back to that later on. I think that's a really important point. There's a question over here.
I think, I'm not sure, I've done secondary science, whether there's that much difference between the boys and the girls. This concept of failure is a problem for me. I had a girl say to me, what's the point, I'm not going to pass the exam anyway. And when you're teaching at Key Stage 3 and 4, and they know that their predicted grade is a D or an E, they don't want to do science. And I would love to scrap the exam for those children and just have fun learning science, but not making it assessed. It's a core subject, but no exam at the end for these children. But we can't do that at the moment in the current term. But they would learn far more science if they didn't disengage because they thought they were going to fail the exam and there's no point because the exam was the only reason for doing it.
Actually, that's something I'd quite like to kind of get some input from the room on, because in terms of paths into science and what we're talking about, we're saying, and we're speaking very much about traditional academic routes sort of through the A-level streams. And I've been having kind of quite a few interesting conversations at the moment about other routes like apprenticeships, other vocational routes, and kind of barriers within schools about promoting those pathways to students because of the way metrics and how things are measured. I'd quite like to get everybody's perspective on that kind of thing, especially because stereotypes for those routes are sort of double than for girls. Is that
Points to make on that?
Does anybody talk about vocational routes in their classrooms?
We're just starting. I'm a secondary school physicist, and we're just starting. I think we had our first apprentice, not in science, can't even remember what she did, last year, and so we're just beginning to sort of introduce that into our sort of what you might do after you've been with us.
How have you found it getting going?
Well, a lot of resistance from parents, and yeah.
I think when people don't actually realise how vocational science really is, because you have got to get hands in and doing it. There's no good sitting there with a textbook and just reading from a textbook.
I think part of the problem is that everything has to be a university now. So whereas you had technical colleges and there were obvious sort of routes, it's not, I think, so obvious perhaps now.
Yeah, I suppose there are the new UTCs that
Yes.
are kind of still quite new, aren't they?
Yes.
A lot of big, especially with engineering companies, apprenticeship schemes. But it's kind of then there's an issue with what's good, and again, sort of parents' feelings about whether that's a solid and stable route to a good career.
It's funny you should say that about the universities there, because one of the programmes that we're starting up is a school leaver scheme, which is to encourage these, well, I think they are girls at the moment, to take up a course in university admin. And they're doing this placement, and the idea is that throughout all of these placements they get to learn a bit of HR, a bit of basic clerical work, a bit of finance, and they sit around these different sections, and then they get mentored as well by somebody who's within the team, and they get taught how to do interviews and how to write personal statements with that, with the applications for those in mind. And that's been a really, really interesting scheme. We focus it on one school in particular, and it's something that we're thinking about broadening out, because it shows that university isn't just about coming and doing a degree and doing science and going off and finding cures for everything. It's actually, the infrastructure of university means that we need an awful lot of other support, more vocational support, and that's, for me, it's been really eye-opening. I think it's a scheme that can probably grow. I mean, obviously I'm based in universities, that's all I know. But it's good to give children those options. It's not, you don't just have to go to university and do a degree.
Depends how they're suited as well. I mean, I went down the university route for teaching, but it doesn't suit me very well at all. Academia, like I used to fight and just come out average.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if it was marks for effort, I'd be top. But it would come out not so great. But that was just how my brain works. But you stick me and tell me to do something, it's much better. So if there were more vocational ways into something like that, it would probably pick up those children who think, I'm not really good in tests and I'm not good with this side of things.
But actually, the flip side of that is there is that kind of idea that vocational routes are people who aren't good enough or bright enough for academics. And actually, we've spoken to a few students who said the amount of resistance I had because I wanted to go and do an apprenticeship, because I wanted to get in there to this company and learn about it and just get my hands in. And I was told by everybody in my life, no, I should go to university. And that kind of, that pressure.
Well, I think actually the interesting thing about that now is that a lot of the companies that we work with are interested in taking people at a younger age so that they can educate them in the way that they'd like them to be educated, rather than having some pre-formed view of the university about how they think people should be educated. I did see a hand over there.
I used to work in an all-girls very good school in London, and we had a very, very talented A-level biologist who was desperate to go to Cirencester Agricultural College, and she met with a huge amount of resistance from her parents because it wasn't a traditional way, especially for girls, to go. And I think half the battle is actually making sure that the parents understand this idea that it's okay to go down a slightly less traditional route. But the difficulty is that also a lot of the students don't necessarily know the complete variety of things they can do. I know myself, you know, when I went to university, I decided, right, I'm going to do biological sciences because I like biology. Whereas actually, I ended up specialising in biochemistry and genetics, and actually, going back, I probably would have made a different choice in my degree, but I just wasn't aware it was available. And I think from a very early age, the more we can do to show the children adults in different areas of the profession and in different roles, the better it is.
So that's one of the things we're calling for. So Science Fair is also kind of an advocacy and campaigning organisation, and one of the things we're calling for is how do we better support teachers to do that, because it's totally unrealistic to expect one person to know about all of these different routes. And actually it's working out what the barriers are, typically between employers, and how you actually really connect professionals with schools in a sort of sustainable way that's not just every so often somebody turns up and gives a 10-minute talk and then they go away again. How do you kind of build those relationships and give legacy to that advice as well? So I think that's in supporting teachers.
So, and I think again, a lot of the big corporates that we work with are very keen on building those kinds of support mechanisms. So a lot of them will have educational groups, educational departments, and they're very keen to work with school teachers at over all of the levels in trying to provide that kind of information. I saw a question there.
Hi, I'm from Pakistan. I went to university in this country and I did my master's in environmental sciences, and it was a pretty academic, like university is very academic. And thinking back, I thought I would have had a lot more fun if that master's degree had been very hands-on, very practical. So sometimes I feel like universities need to just have a mixture, like I'm a primary school teacher now, and I changed my career route after I qualified as a teacher. But what I'm saying is primary schools have a very hands-on approach to teaching science. Secondary schools, it's a bit dull. University was very dull.
You didn't come here!
Come here, it's so especially it's still part of
and then you have this image of vocational schools. To break that image, if university was very, very hands-on, we could break those barriers and those image of
That's a lot of the work that we're trying to do actually. It's interesting because through our Reach Out Lab, we bring school kids in and we show them a working laboratory, and we also take them around, so if they're doing spectroscopy for example, we'll take them to some of our research labs where they've got big massive kit that's really exciting, and they get to see work in progress as well, and they understand the research side of things. So it's showing them that they're, I mean obviously some degrees are very, they're very two-dimensional and that's fine, but for us it's about breaking down that barrier of what is a university like, Is it that you sit in front of people talking and you're falling asleep and writing your notes off the table? Or are you in there doing practical work? So we do try, and even from a very young age, we do try to bring that on board for them. It is hard in some degree courses, it is going to have to be from a book, but it's the hands-on aspect, and also it's the nuggets of information about research careers that follow, and that's where we get our very young enthusiastic researchers, and they'll do a tour around their lab showing some high amazing kit thing that, you know, the kids couldn't even dream of. I mean, for me, it's, you know, it's absolutely fascinating. Take them to an electron microscope suite and seeing what they can pull out of it, and it's, you know, it is fascinating. So yeah, I totally hear what you're saying.
And I think that came up really clearly from Louise Archer's work at King's, this idea of science capital, that it's about kind of having something visible and relevant in your life, a real connection, and so you can really see what your opportunities are, as you were saying, and making it relevant to you and your passions and your identity, and also how you communicate what that is, like creativity, rather than just like you can do this, study this. It's about kind of a values-based.
We've had quite a lot of comments, I think, from UK colleagues, which is great. I think that's fantastic. I wonder if there are any comments from colleagues from other countries where perhaps you have a different perspective on this issue, or a different experience in terms of bringing young women into science.
I'm from Ireland. I don't know. There's a lot of emphasis on being a scientist, but for me and for my small kids, we invite the parents in to tell us about their job. But the 3 questions we always ask them is, what's your name, where do you work, and do you use science in your job? And it's amazing, we've had scientists who are full-time nannies, and we've had scientists who are shopkeepers, and we have scientists who are nursery school teachers. And what they do is they look at their job and they say, okay, well look, I'm not a scientist, but I do loads of science, and this is what I do. So that you're not separating science from real life, you're actually showing them that science is part of real life.
Yes.
You can be a scientist just by being anything.
And I think we certainly here believe that actually having some understanding of the scientific process, or what data means when you hear it on the Radio 4 programme, you know, what does it mean that users twice as likely to get something? If you don't know what the likelihood was in the first place, you can't make an assessment. So just understanding the science process is really important for everybody in their everyday lives, and we certainly would absolutely agree that's really important, I think, in particularly encouraging girls to do science, that it is part of everyday life as well as maybe becoming a scientist.
And actually on that, there's a good resource from the Science Council, the 10 types of scientist, which sort of try and break down some of that stuff.
I have a lot of parents ask me similar questions. So they hear that I'm a scientist and they want to sort of know what that all means, and is that a route that their child can go down? And I say to them, you know, people use science in everyday life. I mean, I've got friends that were studying science with me that have gone into sort of finance, because the skills are so transferable from one aspect of a career to another. So I could say you could start off being a scientist, and then you could end up, say, in finance, you could end up working in law, working in patent offices. You know, it's not just that science route. There's plenty of branches that other students can go down, and they're not really well represented within science.
Exactly. Maybe there's a structural issue there about kind of really early specialisation, and how, you know, having kind of your cross-curricular stuff, and rather than teaching things in sort of silos, how it's easy to kind of branch those things.
Oh, sorry.
She's moving. Yeah, no. Your arm was starting to
move. I went to Royal Girls' School and I started last year. And some of the comments you made, it's actually a little bit too true, that I've walked into this school to find that science isn't actually appreciated or loved. And that a lot of our girls go on to boarding schools with common entrance exams and things like that. But when I began in the school was similar to what you had said, was I've made it the year of science, so everything that's going to be happening in events is going to be based around science. And we've actually pulled in a lot of our parents who are highly educated in different areas of science, especially oncology. They've been coming in, and ever so slowly I've watched the children's attitudes completely change to it. But it brings on to the point of not just leaving it in a science lesson for these things to be discovered. For example, next week I actually have an indoor fireworks show coming in, so all of these children will have gone to bonfire shows and fireworks displays. But it's then finding everyday things to be brought into schools, such as these shows which will show the chemicals burning and forces and things like that. Also got people like a Concorde pilot coming in to talk about his flight. So I do believe it's finding those little basic links that it can so easily be found with just a little bit of passion and a little bit of in-depth looking. But what I find is the problem are some teachers who might be stuck in their ways, who don't have, I'm not expecting everyone to have a passion for science, but it's trying to motivate the teachers. That's what I find is the key issue. And kind of, you know, with yourself, I'm putting someone like you into is an instant motivator. But that's the issue that I find in the school, that the teachers don't like science. There's not enough time to do it. There's not enough preparation, and that's what I find is the problem.
I think what we've done at our school, because we've had that exact problem, especially if it's in the afternoon, you don't have a TA or anything like that, if it's in primary school. What we've actually agreed in our school is that every class gets their TA once a week in an afternoon, and that is your afternoon for science. So you've got an extra hand if someone kicks off, you've got someone to help with the preparation, and actually we've already noticed it's actually being done properly, I want to say, kind of on a more regular basis, just by having a little bit like extra help around, like an extra pair of hands really makes a difference.
One of the schools that we work with, it's a fairly new school, it's a very novel idea, but they are bringing in the afternoon sessions. So in the morning, they do, say, music, for example, and in the afternoon, everybody plays the trumpet. I mean, it sounds horrendous. Literally, it sounds horrendous.
Headache.
Yeah. And then the next day, they'll be doing something with science, and in the afternoon, everybody does the practical. The next, I mean, it's a very strange way of doing the curriculum, but the idea is that the children learn through doing something practical, whether it is music, whether it's physics, whether it's maths, whether it's art, or even English. Read a book, then let's perform it. And I think there's that. I mean that is an extreme example, but I quite like the quirkiness of it. And maybe not everybody learns to play the trumpet, but that kind of, let's get stuck into it, let's not be afraid, let's stand up and talk, let's stand up and play something quite ludicrous.
I think that one aspect we are trying to do in Scotland through the Technical for Excellence is break down that barrier about having a unified curriculum, which is from 3 to 18. So it looks at the early years flowing into a transition into primary, into the broadband, so that the unit of education is a broadband education from early primary to up to 15, then the senior phase of employability. But we tend to find as well that if we're beginning to say to our teachers, you must deliver the curriculum through 4 different modes. And it brings girls very much into that because it's about delivering the curriculum through life and the work of the school, through subject-based teaching. Interdisciplinary learning must be an aspect that's delivered in science throughout the broad-general education and even into the senior phase. So then link into the work of universities who use a lot of interdisciplinary learning, and girls are very good at that cooperative aspect of it. And the other aspect is to look at opportunities for personal and wider achievements, and we find a lot of our girls do the citizenship science, where they actually make discoveries to take out to the community. So they record data, and from that data take it out to the community and involve in that kind of aspect. The other bit I think you need to bring up, if you're looking at girls, very much, and the thing of failure, we really have to tackle parents, because Carol Dweck's quite very explicit about the feedback that parents give to girls at a very young age that set them up for a defensive way of living. You're very pretty and you're very clever. So the minute I'm not looking pretty and clever, then I'm looking as if I'm dumb. And they build in that kind of aspect. So when you look at the early years, I do feel for down south that we may not be successful, but we were really pushing that 3 to 18 students and universities and schools as part of the educational process. And I think interdisciplinary learning is an aspect of learning that does help bring girls much more into science and life.
One of the interesting things you said about parents, and I think there's probably going to be quite a lot of thoughts on this, is engaging the parents. We've started a long-term cohort programme starting at year 10, and we're going to bring the year 10 kids in for a launch event here with their parents. And we have a session for the parents, and we have a session for the kids, and also, you know, the teachers are involved. The teachers help us select. the kids that will come on it, but it is educating the parents as well, telling them that this is what we're going to be doing with them, this is the sort of message we want to give out. It's really, really hard, and what I'm hearing around the room is that there's a lot of work that needs to be done to
Are you getting
support
invited
parents.
to the parents from the lower sim indexes, where the index of multiple deprivation, because I've been children aspire to anything and they never see it.
Very hard.
And we're actually finding you have to get out to these parents because it's all about the crime.
It's almost a whole separate outreach arm, isn't it?
That's
For the
the
parents.
where we have to go.
Oh, not hearing over here, so we need to shout a bit more. I have no difficulty shouting, I've been doing it. Did you have a point?
Yeah, I'm totally with you on this, the role models, and this is great, this parents coming in to do that. I went to a very sort of low achieving school in the centre of London. None of the parents around me did anything exciting. They were either not working or didn't have particularly exciting jobs. I didn't know about any of the jobs I could possibly do. It was a doctor, a nurse, I don't know, you worked in a shop, very, very bland, these kind of career choices. And we were given careers advice, and you had these, again, these very sort of basic job titles, if you like, none of the interesting things. I didn't even know they existed. And okay, so I've got older now and you learn that, and as you're going along, but I was quite concerned when my daughter was recently in high school, and she's bright and intelligent and can see lots of other jobs, and we're very lucky in that we mix with lots of different people, so she has these ideas. But she recently had careers advice at school, and it was rubbish. It was exactly as it was when I was at school. So perhaps as well, I don't know whether other schools have the same kind of careers, a person that sits there who does careers with every single child in that school, does careers. But perhaps that's an avenue to be going down as well, because I was shocked at how similar it was to mine, which was however many years ago.
I think that's what something that's really great about what's going on here at Imperial is actually professionalising that interface, rather than just sort of leaving it to chance. That, you know, if you're in a particular area, then you've got these great parents. It's about extending that social capital idea. Science gets the same thing. You know, how do you give it to people who don't have it naturally? And I think something that we undervalue is actually the time that professional scientists, engineers, or anybody, you know, we don't have to be narrow about it. How we professionalise that part of a career, and I think that this sort of local employers, local communities, building kind of relationships between universities, employers, that then reach down into schools and actually value that as part of a professional career as well. I think that, and then you kind of get payback too, because people are looking for employability skills. They're looking to feed in and sort of shape and mould. And there's potentially this sustainable funding. There's a way of actually how do you make this sort of stuff sustainable rather than just relying on a really passionate teacher or a great parent. How do you build those relationships? And I think that's where the step change will come in, when we really start professionalising that interface between professionals, teachers and students. And I think that's really great.
I had a question I actually wanted to open up to the room. How many people have actually heard of Stemnet? That's quite a good number, because I find that a lot of people don't actually know about Stemnet. I'm a Stemnet ambassador myself. And what we do, we go into schools on things like career days, and we speak to people, we speak to them face to face, and we go, okay, you know, this is a different careers that you could do. And to be honest, I think it's quite an underused resource.
But the trouble is as well, I mean, I think that there's great potential. There are a lot of ambassadors doing great things, but at the moment, we need to make sure that the person delivering that is good. That they're doing things that are kind of evidence-based. They're not, you know, if you get somebody who's really bad going into a class, you can set yourself back quite a way as well. And actually providing training,
So you do actually get trained on...
Well, you get some training, but and Stemnet, I mean, I think something we speak about really loudly actually in this report, if anybody's interested I can give it to you, is how do we support Stemnet and Stemnet ambassadors? How do we kind of make sure that, you know, middle management in employers and in universities say this is a great thing for somebody in my team to go out and do, and it's part of their career, and that they're trained to do it. And if they're good at it, great. But if actually they're better off speaking to a teacher rather than going in kind of giving a demonstration in front of a class, that's valuable as well. And how do you kind of reframe that?
At my institute, that's what we do. We trained as well at Stemnet, and then we go back and we're trained at our institute on for the University of Greenwich. So we have a very good outreach programme from there.
If the people, exactly, and that's it. And if you can find those kind of, it's a relationship, isn't it? The person, the place where the ambassador is working needs to fully support that initiative for it to properly.
I think it needs to be more well known. A lot of institutes now that I work with don't know.
We're running out of time, so there's just one other thing I'd like to open up for discussion. So when I look at our undergraduate population, we only teach science, engineering, medicine and business. In the life sciences department and medicine, we have about a 50% female to male student ratio of undergraduates. If I look at some of the other departments, physics, 20% women, some of our engineering, 10% women. So part of, I think, what we were trying to do collectively, hopefully with teachers, is get girls more interested in some of those subjects that they are historically not interested in. It's a really difficult issue. I think one of the reasons that girls are interested in the life sciences and medicine is because they can really see the relevance for themselves. And I was having quite an interesting discussion just this morning about this with a physics teacher at the front here. So Tessa, I wondered if you might open up the discussion about how do we engage girls more proactively in those sciences and engineering that they historically have not in this country been interested in. There you go. or anybody else who has something to contribute to that issue, because for me that's a really big issue for us and it hasn't changed over years and years.
I will try to recover my memory from the wonderful lesson in the morning. For me, it's kind of learning science or teaching science, not by number or letter, but by song and the feeling and image. So to me, I mean, I'm not a scientist. Well, science think me science. Well, what is science? Well, it's a very hard one. It's very difficult and mathematical and numbers and formula. Well, I dislike it. Well, this is quite common for accepting this wonderful scientists like you. So for educators or for the pedagogical sense of view, that we are just thinking about, we are just concentrating on the knowledge itself. But this is a time when we may think about to find the knowledge by what kind of tools or language or things. We have been doing science with one tool of numbers and very abstract logics. But now is the time, this is the time when we are trying to change or invite some very different types of learning and teaching. Well, not by number or not by such a hard science, but by, isn't there any soft science?
Yeah.
Why the science is such a hard one? Making science by song and feelings.
And I think that experiential dimension is very, very attractive to women and young girls.
Well, I think just coming in on that, one question that I wanted to ask, because I think actually a big problem. So I teach physics in secondary school, but I also teach, we have a primary school as well, so, and I teach from 4 right the way through to 18, and I actually also teach a bit at the university and do some practical demonstrations, so I teach from 4 to 22, and I'm very interested in the sort of progression of children, young people learning as it goes through. And what I feel is that we sort of artificially divide things into subjects, and really what we need is a sort of much more cross-curricular approach. And so when I'm working with the little ones, they have a very topic-based learning, and we just draw all sorts of ideas from their science, and I'm wanting to convert the world to engineers myself personally. And so we we study aspects of science, chemistry, physics, biology, lots of different things, depending on the topic, but always ending up to use those ideas to actually design and make something, so then it becomes engineering. And I feel that we lose that. So what I'm fighting at my own school for the moment is to try and take, so I'm doing this right across the primary school, but what I would like to see in our secondary school, and I'm struggling at the moment to maybe get in Year 7 a sort of rotation. So we have technology, it's a girls' school, so we have food and we have textiles, and I want to see in there STEM. So I don't want physics, I don't want chemistry or biology, they do all that in lessons. I want STEM, where they're using ideas from their sciences, but also from geography, from English, from history, to make something, to build and create. And I think, you know, that's my sort of vision. But coming on from what you were saying, I think maths is a big stumbling block, and particularly for girls. And they love science and they're passionate about science, and then they say, oh, well, I can't do it because I can't do maths. And there seems to be this curtain that comes down for many girls, I can't do maths. And therefore, I can't do physics, I can't do engineering because you need maths. And I wondered what people had to say about that.
To be honest, I'm going to schools and I'm a maths and I'm a science specialist, so I don't do one without the other. Because I say that maths is a science, is a language of science.
Well, actually, I find that as I'm teaching, they don't know it, but they're learning maths.
Yeah.
And when they don't know it, they can do it. Yeah. When they don't know that it's maths. Yeah. And so we measure and we do all those things, and we handle number and we have data and we do all those things.
Yeah. I say to all
so
my
why
students,
is it
it's
maths?
a different language. It's a completely different language. If I can learn French and Spanish, then I can also learn maths. And I use different techniques, because I mean, I take me to groups, and like you say up there, in learning them in a softer way, because I work with also special needs children, because I find they don't get as much input as they would do in a sort of regular sort of classroom themselves. And I try and use a variety of means to try and get their ideas across to them. So that could be singing a song, it could be writing a poem, it could be me getting up and pretending I'm an atom and running around a classroom. There's different ways of being able to teach and different ways for a student to be able to learn. And I think we need to get across this mentality that it's one method, one way of doing it. There's more than one method. There's kinetic learners, there's audio learners, there's people that just learn from what they see, photographic memory. But we need to cater to all those different students, and we're very fixed at the moment with one method of learning, one method of delivery. And that's what I think needs to be changed. That's the teaching aspect of kind of thing.
I think we've got time for one more comment. You've had your hand up there.
Yeah, sorry. You were mentioning how do you get your numbers up in terms of physics and engineering, and you also mentioned about failure. And this gentleman here made an interesting comment about, oh, well, science is too difficult, why would I take it? And is there something in the fact that girls will take a subject that they know they're going to achieve top grades in because they are seeking that success and not able to handle that failure? And I just wonder if that's part of the reason why we pick the other subjects over picking college, because they're so scared of not getting that top grade, because of how they're going to open the kids up.
I think there is something in that. There's also I can't remember the study, but there's the idea that knowing what you need to take and where you need to go. So people are ambitious, they know they want to be a particular thing. That you need to take physics to get there, and there's a real barrier with knowing that physics is a real gateway subject and all the places it can take you. And I think if that was better communicated, there's a reason to take physics as well. And that kind of, and I think the engineering thing is great, and to tap into that messaging about. I mean, I did some mentoring with some primary school students a few weeks ago, and all of them said, I want to be a doctor because I want to help people. And that kind of helping people message. I mean, exactly, like engineering, but that's about changing the world.
and yet it comes back to the one picture that all the children will draw when you ask them to draw a scientist is the same. So there's only one kind of science.
It's a myth
that's the
white
error.
coat, crazy hair, I find.
Enter science.
Yes.
Well, here we all are
White coats and your beards.
to break that image, and as you've heard, lots of us go out actually into schools, partly to try and break that image that people have, that stereotype that people have of scientists.
I'm shocked by it, I find. The kids sort of go, but you can't be a scientist because you don't look like a scientist. What meant to look like?
extraordinary thing is every time that research is done for the last 50 years, we get the same results.
Yeah.
So we're not cracking it yet.
So we're in a highly gendered, stereotypical society still, and actually we've come back to failure as being an issue, but we've heard how important you are as teachers to try and break down some of these stereotypes. We've also heard a lot about parents actually, and I think this is really, really important. I understand that it's going to be a very different issue in different schools, where parents aren't even interested in their children going to schools, to schools where they're highly engaged and want to do everything that they possibly can, including giving large amounts of money. And it's actually that your kind of schools that you've been talking about, where we're much more interested in trying to engage, because those are the schools that need it. But I think, we could go on with this discussion actually for hours, and we heard about the American dimension. There are other dimensions in here as well. I hope you've enjoyed the discussion. I think we all have really been delighted to be here with you. Well, keep up the great work, because so many times we've heard how important the teacher is to all of these issues that we've been talking about, particularly when it comes to supporting girls and the next generation of girls into science. Thanks very much indeed.